Morning, folks. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters and the Pathfinder School. And out here at the Pathfinder School in Southeast Ohio, we teach wilderness survival, woodsmanship, bushcraft, plant lore, wilderness first aid, ropes and rigging, intensive navigation, and all types of subjects that revolve around woodsmanship in general. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in taking a class with us, to go to selfrelianceoutfitters.com, look under the training tab, and you'll find a list of all of our classes for the remainder of 2024 and 2025 for the first half of the year. So on to the video. Yesterday we shot a part 1 video of the squirrel camp from over the weekend, and we did the pocket dump of some of the hunters and things that were out here. And a lot of guys ask, where's the squirrels at? Well, we got 5 or 6, I think, in total. I did not hunt. This is my property. I can hunt anytime I want to. So I stayed back with the cook and made sure that there was plenty of water, plenty of firewood. Fires were going when everybody got back to keep them warm or get them warm back up, things like that. And we cooked those squirrels and ate them, and then we proceeded to shoot the pocket dump style video. So we had already eaten those squirrels by the time that video was shot. That's why you didn't see them in the video. Let's talk a little bit about today. We're going to do a part 2, probably a part 3 in this series of this traditional squirrel camp. And what I would say to you is that, I labeled this Depression era camping. And to me, I say that because that's kind of the period that I was kind of looking at when I was putting together my camp for this weekend. And although it was a classic camping type camp. And so to explain that to you, for those that don't understand those things, and they are kind of confusing sometimes, I will admit. Classic camping is considered the period from 1890 to 1939, 40-ish, okay? So that 50-year window is the time span that you're looking at when you are trying to relive, and I won't say reenact, we'll talk about that in a minute, relive that classic camping experience. And if you think about your grandfather, if you're my age, your grandfather was in that time period. Your father was probably born in that time period and grew up later in the 40s and 50s. But if you're trying to relive what your grandfather's experienced in the woods, then you need to do that kind of with the equipment, the clothing, the sleep gear, the cook gear, the ammunition, the optics, all the things that they would have had back then, so you can actually experience what it was like to be in that time period, to relive those days. Now, you think a 50-year time period is pretty broad swatch. And I kind of chose to go into that 1930s Depression era time frame because most of the things that I already use fit into that time frame fairly easily. And we'll talk about that as we get through this video. You may have to look at particular clothing, but if you look at what I'm wearing right now, this is just my everyday dress. For bumming around the woods, I've got a 100% cotton shirt on. It's buttoned up the front, 2 pockets. Other than the exact style of the collar, pretty close to a 1934, 35, 36 time frame of clothing. Probably would have had a white t-shirt on and not a colored t-shirt or some type of a long underwear shirt. The hat that I'm wearing is a fedora style hat, very common in that period. This one is new. This one is a Stetson crushable expedition hat, but it is exactly the same style, the same material, therefore it's fine. It doesn't necessarily have had to have been made in the time period that you're looking at. It has to be in the same material, the same style, same design. Talk about boots, these LL Bean boots right here. LL Beans have been made since 1910. The design of the LL Bean hunting boot hasn't changed that much over the last, almost 100 years, or over 100 years actually. So if you bought a newer pair or a vintage pair of LL Bean boots in this style, and you're already wearing them, they would be fine for that impression, okay? Or that reliving of history, because your grandfather probably wore boots very similar to this. And the point of this classic camping era really is that you can still find many of the things that were used in that time period, even things that were actually produced in that time period, are still fairly easy to find in the present day. If you're reenacting the 1700s, you're probably not going to find anything that still exists today that was made in the 1700s. That's not in a museum, in a collector's kit somewhere, or collector's collection somewhere, or on display, or something that is unaffordable anyway because it's such a valuable piece of history, okay? With this, it's a little different. You know, you can find lots and lots of things still today at rummage sales, antique malls, estate sales, roadside sales, big group flea markets, things like that. You can find things all day long that were made in or produced in or near the 1930s that the design didn't change, the material didn't change, so they fit that classic camping period very easily. So it's an inexpensive hobby to get into. And again, I say reliving and not reenacting because you're not acting like you are classic camping. You are classic camping. It's not like if you do a battle reenactment, and this was a conversation that Nathan Lodgen and I had that kind of really hit home with me as far as reenacting goes. Most of reenacting revolves around battles of some kind, whether it's Civil War, Revolutionary War, 18th century, 1812, whatever it is, World War I, World War II. Most of those reenactments take place around battlefields, battlegrounds, or certain battles that are recreated, and you're just shooting blanks at your buddy. You're not getting a real experience. With classic camping, you can get the real experience every single day very easily because it's hunting, fishing, trapping, tracking, woods lore, woodcraft, camping. That's what it's all about. So you can get that experience every day. And for me, it was pretty easy. And for some of you, it may be as well. Because if you've looked at my videos or watched my videos for any length of time, you know, I've always been a very traditionalist when it comes to camping. Now, my gear may have not fit right in that 1930s time frame, but most of the stuff I use was made in the 70s or earlier, right? And if you look at today being 2024, if it was made in 1974, it's already 50 years old. So that same swatch of 50 years, I'm still using that kind of stuff every day, and a lot of it's much older than that. And so it was a very easy transition for me to say, okay, this particular piece of kit or this particular pair of jeans, these Levi's, might have been fine in the 70s, but I need something that is a different pattern, even though it's the same material, for a Depression era camp, all right? It's not that hard. It's not that expensive. It's fairly easy. And you can find catalogs, magazines, books, all kinds of stuff online that's even free in PDF format that shows you the kit that was for sale, the gear that was for sale. And you'll see a lot of it is not that far from what you have today. And it's very easy to find a lot of those things. Like your grandfather may have some of them laying around somewhere that you can get even to use for traditional classic camping if that's what you choose to do. Now, again, the reason I say this is probably going to be a multiple part video is because I didn't come out here in minimalist fashion for this camp. And the reason I didn't do that was because, number one, there were going to be several other people here that have common interest of that classic camping era. So there was a lot of trading going on. There was a lot of gifting going on. There was a lot of selling this or that going on. There was a lot of just showing your stuff off going on. Hey, this is my favorite piece of kit and it's an original. What do you think about that? Okay. And so there was a lot of that going on as well. And because of that, I brought quite a bit more stuff out here than I normally would for just a couple days. You know, I'm a really simple guy. I had a simple set of cookware and a bedroll and a tarp and my firearms, and see you later. I'd have been ready to go. I've got quite a bit more than that out here today. And so it's going to take a little bit more time to go through that with you. That's why this will be a multi-part video. So what I thought I'd do first is just kind of walk through the basic components or the main things like kit by kit or box by box, and just say this box is this kit's for that, this is my cookware, this is, you know, what it is, and we'll go back from there. And what I did do today was I changed out my firearms. Okay, I was carrying a 38 Smith & Wesson 1910 model government. If I'm trapping, I'm almost always going to be carrying a 22. The only 22 I have from the period is my H&R Trapper in 22, and I've got a small snub nose H&R in 22 as well. I didn't bring them to this camp because a 38 would have been more traditional for a hunting camp, for protection from animals and things like that in and around camp, or from, you know, vagabonds and things like that may have strolled into the area you were camping in. Now, a 12 gauge shotgun, I changed it out. I had a Model 97 Winchester pump, first made in 1897, very period. It was a takedown model of that firearm, and it was great for a squirrel hunting gun in that period. Normally I carry an H&R 12 gauge, single shot break open. That's what I brought out here this morning because I was going to go do some squirrel hunting this afternoon anyway. Again, probably made in the late 70s, okay? So it is what it is, but it's very traditional. A single shot shotgun that was made before 1940 would be fine. And I have at least 3 or 4 of them on top of a couple double barrels and that 1897. So you may have a lot of things already that you use that may fit into that time period, and it may not be hard for you to get into that reliving traditional camping, experience with other people if you just think about it, okay? So let's talk about what I brought out here. And again, a little more elaborate than I would have brought, but also being able to lend things to people that may need them, maintain a group fire pit, things like that are some of the reasons for having this stuff. So let's go over it a little bit at a time, and then we'll get more detailed in the next video. Okay, so what I thought we'd do is just start with the basic camp layout itself real fast, okay? I did bring a wooden folding chair on top of a folding camp stool. Folding camp stool is very correct for the Depression era. It was actually, that pattern of stool was sold by Abercrombie & Fitch in the 1920s and 30s. This chair would have also been very period correct as far as the Depression era goes, these wooden folding chairs, but they would have been carried by auto campers and things like that, not by someone on foot. However, I brought it out here because I wanted a comfortable place to sit all weekend and didn't want to just sit on a stool or sit on the ground when we're sitting around the campfire, telling stories, drinking coffee, and having fun, okay? Backpack, Chopper Nelson, very correct for the time period. Again, any Boy Scout pack that's that color is probably old enough to pass for sure. So you don't have to get real extravagant with the backpack either. Any World War I backpack would be fine. You can buy a lot of those in reproduction, okay, from What Price Glory. Here is a oilskin tarp, 10 by 10, set up in a similar fashion to a Wheelan, although it's just a square 8 by 8 tent Smith's tarp, because I've dropped one eyelet or one tie-out loop down below the ridge line on both ends, and I've got 3 on the ridge line. Back to the whole wood crafting thing, the entire frame of this thing is wood crafted, so I would have carried in the tarp and then cut the poles on site, and it doesn't take that many poles. I've got a bipod on each end, I've got a ridge pole, and then I have a cross pole here tied to this side of the bipod that comes up to hold out in the front of that to give me a large space underneath where I can comfortably sleep and work if the weather turns inclement, all right? A very, very good shelter setup. It's one of my favorite setups with a 10 by 10 tarp for camp, okay? And you can see that my fire is over here and my shelter is over there. If you're going camping and you plan to have a fire so close to you that you can feel the heat from it, and that's your planned way to stay warm, you already failed, okay? You should be carrying what you need to sleep comfortably, and the fire is for cooking or for an emergency, all right? So we'll start over here at the fire pit real quick. Very simple setup here. 2 uprights, split out with a reduction on the stick. The galley pole there shoved in between as a wedge. It's tied off with simple tie wire. I always carry tie wire in my toolkit for camping, and a lot of times I have tie wire with me on the trap line anyway, so it's a good woodsman's resource to carry, and a pair of pliers will twist that bad boy down for you, no problem, to keep it from splitting out any further, okay? You can see it's a little loose now because the wood has shrunken from when I made this green, but it's still keeping it from splitting out, so it's not hurting anything. I've got one pot hook I made here. Again, it's tie wired and notched, so it can't come undone. And on the other end, I just took a tail and turned it up so that I can hang my spatula or my skillet from that and hang my coffee pot from this, because I use a pretty simple cook system around the fire. Okay, tools real quick, larger tools. I have an axe, and this is a new Council Tool Woodcraft axe. I say new, but it's fairly old and used. However, an axe is kind of an axe. Nobody's going to bellyache if you got a wooden handled axe. You just don't want a fiberglass handled axe. You got a wooden handled axe of just about any pattern. It's going to be fine for, classic camping, because pretty much an axe is an axe is an axe. Metallurgy was far enough along at that point in time that axe heads haven't changed that much, as long as they're not cast heads. from that time period. I have a World War I shovel right there. So I have an axe and a shovel. And up here I have, underneath this wool coat, I have a tree saw, a tree trimming saw in a leather case, okay? Folding saws were not that common back then, but a large tree trimming saw like that would have come in handy for cutting poles the size of these, easy enough for shelter construction, okay? So you got three fairly large tools there. Of course, my stool we already talked about. There's a set of fire irons right here, just two metal pieces, 18 inches long, used for supporting pots and pans over the keyhole area of a fire for dragging coals in and cooking, as I showed in some videos recently. Now, I do have a sled here, and that sled is really multifunctional. It's not something that I would necessarily have this time of year in camp. Obviously, there's no snow on the ground. However, 2 weeks from now, when it's trapping season, it's much easier to drag something out on a sled than it is to carry it out, especially a 40, 50-pound beaver, or 2 or 3 30-pound raccoons, or even, you know, a quartered deer. Much easier to drag that out on a sled if you can do that. It also gets my boxes off the ground, because I can take this box, which is my food cook box or my chuck box, turn it sideways and drop the flap down, and it becomes sort of a table, okay? And what's in here is very, very simple. We can go over it all in another video, but I have very few cook utensils, a couple more pots, a water bag, a water cooler, some hot chocolate, a folding handle forest service skillet made out of steel. And again, you'll notice a lot of this stuff that we're looking at, coffee pot, folding handle skillet, all are things that I'm developing or have developed already to replicate those with modern materials and modern design for use today. And so you get a lot of inspiration by doing this classic camping stuff to understand what's going to work good today, because I'm a big believer in if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And this stuff works just as well today as it did, you know, 80 years ago or whatever it is. This is, if you're looking at 35 to, 80, 90 years ago. I have a lantern, and I have fuel for that lantern. We'll talk about that later, obviously. All right, so this is an actual locking box. You can see it has a padlock on the front of it. The key for it's actually right here, okay? 2-prong key. And this is where I keep my tools, smaller tools, maintenance equipment, things that I can clean my firearms with, and ammunition. All go in this box. That's why it locks. There's also one light in there on top of a lantern so that I have light when I need it immediately if I have to have it, okay? We'll go through all of this stuff later on. I just wanted to show you the main box to begin with. I had a couple things sitting on top of it that came out of the box as well. A pair of binoculars, compass for mapping, things like that. We'll talk about those another time as well. I have a line winder right there. All the tent rope goes on. Tent stakes stashed conveniently in that in camp, and a set of pulleys, both single shiv and double shiv, for hoisting deer and things like that around camp. A simple bedroll. The rest of my bedding is right there, and my pack is over there, okay? That pretty much is all of the things that I brought to camp, but the main kits are a cook kit, obviously a maintenance repair and ammunition box, bedding, shelter, and then larger tools. Those are really your main kits that you're concerned with, or that you're going to put together for a camp like this, all right? All right, fellas, so what we can do is we can go through all these boxes basically one at a time, if that's what you want, and I'm fine with that. I'll leave this stuff up here for another day. I'm gonna go hunting this afternoon anyway, so I don't feel like tearing it down. I'll leave it up here for another day, and we can tear it down tomorrow. And as we're kind of putting it away, we'll kind of reverse engineer the box and show you how everything goes in there and the contents of those boxes while we're at it. But really, you've got, again, a couple main things that you have to understand. Your kits become compartmentalized, very much like if you were carrying one backpack and you had pouches for individual kits, like I've shown in videos. You basically have a tool or camp box. You have some type of a chuck box, which is your food and cookware box. You have a shelter system, and then you have main tools that you may use that are larger, that won't fit in the camp box necessarily, like your axe, your shovel, your saw. And then beyond that, it's just firearms or traps or fishing equipment, depending on what you plan to do. Now, let's talk real quick about places that you can get information on this, place that you can go and get questions answered about this if you choose to, all right? The Bannerman's Camp is a good Facebook group that you can go to. It's ran by Sarge Vining, and you can go there and ask any questions you want to ask, and you'll get good answers, okay? Places that you can look for information also would be the Pathfinder Learning Center. Most of the guys that were at this camp this weekend are members of that Pathfinder Learning Center. Sarge Vining also has a YouTube channel. Nathaniel Lodgen, who owns Lodgen & Co., who sells reproduction clothing for that time period from 1890 to 1939, and footwear as well, and some accoutrements. You can go check out his website. He's also on a lot of those places that you can ask questions like the Bannerman Camp. James Bender, obviously, I'm sure most of you know his YouTube channel already. He's in the middle of a hobo series right now, which fits right into this classic camping era, and he was out here this weekend. He's a member of both of those groups, both the Pathfinder Learning Center and the Bannerman Camp. So you could shout out to him right there if you wanted to and get questions answered, or you could ask him on his YouTube videos, and I'm sure he answers those questions as well when he can, okay? Other guys that were out here this weekend, Sean Dyer, who is Honorable Outfitters on YouTube, who also owns the Traditional Campcraft Guild, which is basically a private group, but you can join that group as well. But he's on every other group as well, the Bannerman Camp, the Pathfinder Learning Center, several other Facebook groups dedicated to the classic camping era. Books that you can buy, you can buy Camping the Old Style by David Westcott. That is a great book about this classic camping era. Probably the best book I know of as far as a modern book that's been written goes. And obviously Bushcraft 101 has a lot of traditional things in it as well, and Advanced Bushcraft. Those are both woodcraft type books labeled Bushcraft, so there's no confusion with the public when they go looking for titles, okay? But they're both books about traditional type camping and woodcraft for the most part. I think that you can find lots and lots of PDFs online, old catalogs, old books. Authors I would look at would be Warren Miller, Hyatt Verrill. I would look at, obviously, Horace Kephart. I would look at Hamilton Gibson. I would look at Warren Miller. I would look at Nesmith. What you have to be careful of with this stuff, and it's kind of one of those things that you run into in the reenacting world, but you could also run into it very easily in this, active traditional camping type environment, is that if you have a book that's very, very famous, like Horace Kephart's book, Woodcraft and Camping, or Nesmith's book on woodcraft and camping, those books were so prolific and they're so famous even still today that a lot of people try to emulate exactly what it says in those books. The exact type of knife, the exact type of axe, exact type of hatchet, exact type of food, exact type of gear. What you have to remember with that is that that's one man's opinion. Just like when I wrote the book Bushcraft 101, Advanced Bushcraft, things like that, it's one man's opinion on what I choose to carry and pack. It doesn't mean that the thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of other people that were doing it did it exactly the same way. So I'd encourage you also to look up, old copies of Field and Stream. A lot of those are PDF'd and archived online. Old copies of Trapper, Trader, Hunter, Trader, Trapper magazine. Old Abercrombie and Fitch catalogs. There's a book that you can buy on Amazon called Buzzacot's Sportsman's Encyclopedia. It's about that thick. It's not that expensive. It's paperback. It's a reprint of an original book, but it has lots and lots of different equipment that you could buy in the time period and explanations for its use. And it kind of gives you a visual of things that you may find even still to this day, or replications or reproductions of those things that you could find today. So it's not hard at all to immerse yourself in that traditional or classic camping type environment. And I would encourage you to do that. Like I said, I started out pretty much traditional camping. My early videos were, canvas tarps and cookware, the steel cookware, and things like that. And it helped me to develop not only my mentality as a woodsman from reading all of these other authors and combining that information into Bushcraft 101, but also it helped me to develop new products. All of our line of stainless steel comes from products that were pretty much already made. I may have redesigned them a little bit, but they may have been made out of aluminum and I made them in stainless steel, but they came from those classic designs. And again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Our 2-quart canteen is very much a military canteen. Our 2-quart, 3-quart bush pot, 8-inch skillet, carbon skillet, nesting sets, all of that stuff is very reminiscent of the old U.S. Forest Service and patrol and Palco camp kits from the period of probably the 1930s through the 1970s, right? All of that stuff you can learn just by reliving the experience and using that type kit. You can understand what you want to do to improve it for yourself in the modern day, because I think you'll find that most of that stuff that was usable then is still very much usable now, and some of it is just as good or better than what's on the market today. You know, this wool jacket that's hanging over here off to the side, when I was at Squirrel Camp, I was gifted a buffalo plaid Filson Mackinac, perfect for that Depression area time frame. This is a Leicester River field jacket, 100% wool, same as the buffalo plaid. Difference is the pattern of the jacket and the fact that this has snaps instead of buttons. Those are kind of things you want to look at. But again, there's disadvantages to buttons over snaps, right? There's advantages, there's also disadvantages. So if you're carrying something that has buttons on it, or your shirt has buttons on it, your jacket has buttons on it, and they're not snaps, or they're not pullover, you better have a sewing kit. These small lessons that you take away from things that you learn the hard way by using that gear is exactly what your grandfather learned as a woodsman. And it will make you a better woodsman, I can guarantee it, because it's made me a better woodsman. Guys, listen, I appreciate you joining me for this quick video today. I say quick, maybe not so quick. I thank you for all your views. I thank you for your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, for our business, for all our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. We're going to make this Squirrel Camp an annual event. You're welcome to join the Campcraft Guild or go to the Bannerman page or contact Sean Dyer direct. It's actually his event. I just sponsored the event here at the Pathfinder School property, as I will again next year if he would like to have it here. And it's going to be more open. We'd like to get more people involved. And again, you don't have to be perfect, right? As long as you're trying, and we can help you with things. And that's what it really boils down to. I think getting people into a new hobby or getting them to experience something different is a matter of helping people to grow. And that's what I want to do with this whole traditional camping and classic campcraft stuff, is I want to help it grow and help people grow it, because it's always been a passion of mine. Even though I never called it classic camping, I just always called it traditional camping. And that's what I always have done for the most part, other than the modern gear videos that I do and things like that. You know, my first love has always been, from the days I first started shooting videos, this classic traditional style of camping. So stay with me, guys, and I'll be back for more videos in the future.